Oh, what's going on, everybody? All right, everybody. Get in podcast mode. We can do it. Feeling good today. There it is. We didn't have music last time. All right. That feels good. I see now why podcasters, they do a little bit of music in the beginning. Always gets the blood rolling, kind of like a psychological cue to let you know that, hey, it's go time. And so I think I'm gonna do with that. Maybe I need to speed it up. I can do the quicker version if it's kind of annoying, but I don't know. Maybe I'll keep it long just because I like it. Welcome to another episode of Mark Queppet Speaks. This is episode number 2, and I have no idea if you guys liked the last episode because I'm recording it before the last one actually was released. So hopefully you like that one, and hopefully you like this one because this one's weird. This one's going to be, it's like really, sometimes I just like, okay, in the past, I'll be working on really big, cool ideas, at least to me, right? And I always felt like I couldn't just like plop y'all in the middle of it. I felt like I had to like work real hard to try and like super simplify it and whatever. And oftentimes that didn't even work. It still ended up like long and complex or whatever. So this time I'm just going to let you guys see what I discovered, because what I discovered I think is actually really, really cool. I've discovered kind of like a map of different states of consciousness that give you power and control, right? Well, that's what we all want. We all want to be powerful, and we all want to be in control, and we all want to level up and all that kind of stuff. At least if you're someone who's self-developmentally minded, which I think most of you are. And I think I've discovered something that's extremely valuable for helping you do that. And so that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. But first, I'm going to take a drink of my drink. Guess what I'm drinking? I bet you probably can't guess. It's not coffee. I actually quit coffee. I've pretty much been off caffeine entirely for the past month. I did have some decaf, or not decaf, I did have some green tea the other day when I was out because I had a little bit of a sore throat. And I wanted to get it when I was out at the Panera doing some work. But other than that, I've been pretty much caffeine free, and I've been feeling great. When I first quit caffeine, it was terrible. It was like I was like underwater for like 2 weeks. But now I'm feeling pretty good. And what I'm drinking now, what I'm kind of hooked on is, you ever hear of like Bragg's apple cider vinegar? It's like a raw, like vinegar. It's just vinegar, but it's made from like apple cider. And I just put a little splash of that in some hot water, and it's nasty at first, but then now I'm addicted to it. I don't know why. It's really gross, but I'm like hooked on it. I actually just ordered, they have like one that has like cayenne pepper and honey in it. I don't know, that looks sweet too. So I ordered that, and makes me feel good. Kind of like gives you a nice little zing. That's what we all want, right? We all just want a little zing, a little pep in our step. But anyway, let's get into this thing here. And I went real hard for you guys. I actually did a full PowerPoint presentation with diagrams and shit because this is going to get a little hairy. I'm trying to think of what I can do to really give you guys some sort of preface into this. Let me see. I think I probably wrote something down. Did I? Oh, right. Okay. So, all right. Here's the preface here. Right? Many of you, or some of you, may be familiar with the idea of the spiral staircase analogy for personal growth. It's basically like this idea that, you go in loops and waves, and like basically it's not a linear straight up path. If you're trying to improve your life, if you're trying to improve yourself, you're going to go through periods where you think you got something and maybe you do have it, but then you're going to forget it, or it's going to stop working, and then you're going to dip, and then you're going to find something down at the bottom of the dip, and then you're going to be able to go higher and maybe even higher this time. And so like the analogy is that you got this kind of looping, meandering, spiraling staircase that you can go upward, but it's not a straight shot. It's kind of frustrating. And this used to drive me crazy because I would get really attached to whatever sort of progress I was feeling. I was like, oh, I had a good day. I feel like, oh, I figured it out. I like found this new mindset and I found this new habit system. And so like now I'm the man. And then like I wasn't the man like 15 minutes later. I was like depressed and completely dysfunctional again. And like and like it would just go like this, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it drove me nuts. Like I would get immediately attached to whatever sort of pleasurable state I was in. And then I would like basically bitch and moan and cry when I would lose that state inevitably. And you just get frustrated with it, especially after you try really, really hard for a really, really long time to then just still end up feeling dissatisfied or running into life problems or things like that. You can get quite frustrated. At least I did. And so like really what I want was some kind of clarity of how the process works. Like that's what I've been looking for a long time, is like, how does this thing work? How can I actually navigate this spiral staircase with some sense of intentionality, not just like freaking riding in the dark? Like, have you guys ever ridden one of those roller coasters that goes through the dark? Like, I know a number of different amusement parks have them, but it's just a roller coaster in the dark. And it's the worst fucking idea. It's the worst thing because like it's basically just like, hey, let's try and make these chiropractors some money, because as you're going through in the dark, you're getting jerked left and right and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, you come out on the other side of it and your neck like really hurts because you don't know you can't see what's coming. Basically, and it's just a painful experience. I did it one time. I was like, no, I'm never doing that again. Why would anyone like that? But that's kind of like how life feels like a lot of times, especially on this spiral staircase. It's like, I'm in the dark. I'm cool if I got to ride this roller coaster of life, but like, at least let me see what the hell's happening so that I can kind of brace myself and know what's going on. So I think I might've found that. I think I might've found a way to kind of turn on the light bulb a little bit and understand at least one of the bigger sort of macro patterns of how all this works. So let's go ahead and get into my PowerPoint. What we got to do here to build this map of consciousness, this map of development, this map of the spiral staircase, we need to build a grid and then kind of extract a cycle from that. So let's go ahead and get into this so you can understand what the heck I'm talking about, okay? So the first thing we're going to do here, all right, we're going to break our experience into vacuous and radiant, okay? If you've followed my stuff for a while, then you've heard these concepts before. Basically, the idea is like vacuous mentality is the idea that you do not have inherent dignity. Radiant mentality is that you do have inherent dignity. And these core narratives are at the root of everything. Everything psychological, everything spiritual, okay? You could say the devil says you have no inherent dignity, and so there's nothing good about you, and so I can do whatever I want with you. And God says there is something inherently good about you because I made you. Like if you want to put it in a kind of very simplistic, Judeo-Christian framework, okay? And so what that practically ends up amounting to, if you operate in one of those narratives or another, is that in the vacuous side, you live life in a possessive mentality. You're trying to get, because since you do not feel that you are good inherently, you feel like you must acquire in order to be good, even in your own eyes. So this is the person who feels like they need to get status, power, success, sex, money, whatever, in order to be good enough. And if you've ever struggled with feelings of not being good enough, well, then you are struggling with a vacuous mentality. And this is how people motivate themselves. They tell themselves, hey, you better get this good thing or else you suck. You better go to the gym because you're fat. And if you want to be good, well, then you better not be fat anymore, like that kind of thing, okay? Other side, the radiant perspective, when you live from there, instead of living from this I need to get stuff place, you can actually start living from an expressive place. You can live from the place of like, oh, my whole purpose here is to just express my most authentic self, right? I'm already good, and all I want is that goodness to be reflected in everything that I do, everything that I say. I don't go to the gym because I suck if I don't. I go to the gym because I want to, I think a healthy and fit body is the best expression of my dignity, right? That kind of thing. So break things down through that, all right? Now, that gives us half of our dichotomy. Next thing we got to look at, which, we can't see. Let's see here. Boom. Okay. We've got metafocus and monofocus. Okay. So these are new terms for me that I've created. And the reason I did this is because really there's like different there's a lot to be said for the flow state, okay? And flow state, like talk in psychology and self-development, is very high. People talk about it all the time. It's like, oh, the key is you got to learn how to enter into flow states. And I would agree with that, but I think flow state is a little bit too limited. It's usually when they use the term flow state, they're talking about that peak kind of experience of being in the zone, okay? And don't get me wrong, that's great, and we're going to talk about where that is, but there are way more states of consciousness that are kind of similar to that, but different. Like we're very regularly, I would say, argue almost always, outside of like maybe like weird transient states, like we are always in some kind of flow. We are always in some kind of automatic unfolding, right? Like our brain kind of just functions on its own, and we have some sort of control over how we point it and direct it and what we're looking at, but like most stuff happens in a flowish, trance-like state, right? Like right now, I'm not thinking about every single word that comes out of my mouth. It's kind of just coming out. And I'm still like, am I in a peak flow state? I don't know, maybe. I'm pretty good at this podcasting thing, I think, but you know, no, but we're always in it. So, but that's not helpful. If everything's sort of a flow, well, then how do we really distinguish this stuff, right? And I know, yes, in the technical terminology of flow state, it's like an intersect between interest and difficulty and all that kind of crap. But just let's do our own thing here, okay? What if we broke things down into flow states that are focused on one specific task versus flow states where we're choosing from multiple options what task to take or what path to take? And that's what I think, that's what I'm doing here. So Metafocus, this is when we're looking at, we're entering into that liminal space I talked about in the last episode, where we are examining all the different avenues forward that we can take. So if you're trying to figure out, you know, what major to pick in college, or you're trying to figure out, well, how do I want to plan my day, or trying to figure out, like, you know, who you should date or something like that. You're taking options and you're holding a bunch of options out and you're trying to select which path to take. That is a different sort of focus and flow than if you've already picked something. Say you've already decided what you're going to do. Say, you know, something as simple as like going through your morning routine. There's no decisions that need to be made. You're just doing it. You're unfolding. You know, if you commit to playing some kind of, you know, if you're playing a video game, it's like you're not really having to make too many decisions, except if it's a decision-making game. You're pretty much just absorbed in. You're playing it. You know, if you're Mario going through the level and you're absorbed in that single task, okay? And that would be monofocus, okay? So metafocus and monofocus. These are important terminologies. And so, and you'll see in a second. So if we overlay what we just talked about plus this, we have a grid. We've got 4 quadrants here, okay? We've got this quadrant here, which is vacuous metafocus, vacuous monofocus. We've got radiant metafocus and radiant monofocus, okay? And that gives us the beginnings of something useful here. So what happens if we fill these different parts in? Well, the way that I see it is that we've got, in terms of vacuous monofocus, we've got craving. This is when you just want that thing. Your eyes are locked on something. Your brain wants some specific thing. You have a single focus and you just want to get it. Okay, because it's in a getting mentality, possessive, all right? That's what makes it craving, okay? And just because you're in this state of craving doesn't mean you're a bad person, okay? Doesn't mean you're entirely vacuous. It just means that is you on the vacuous part of whatever loop you currently on. We are always a mix of vacuous and radiant, I think maybe probably till the day we die. So it's okay. You'll see where I'm going with this. But so craving, vacuous monofocus. Conflict would be vacuous metafocus, okay? So conflict is when, like, you want multiple different things. You're trying to get multiple different things and they are not compatible. And since they're not compatible, you experience conflict inside of you. And that's what happens when you want 2 separate things that are not compatible. Well, you're going to feel that inside of you. It doesn't feel super great. In the same way that, honestly, craving doesn't feel super great either, right? Now, over here, if we move over to passion, okay, passion is similar to conflict in that your brain is examining multiple streams of possibility, but it's coming from a different place. And we'll talk more about like what that is in a second when we talk about moving through these states. But passion is something that's more pure and more focused on authentic expression. It's not about fighting yourself. It's more about being yourself. And then we've got play. Okay, and play is the radiant form of monofocus, where instead of trying to get something, you're focusing on trying to be someone. Specifically, hopefully, yourself. But that's not always the case, so we'll talk about that. So if we take those four things and we put them together like this, what the map that I've come up with here is how to move between these states. And there's a reason why we want to do this, which we'll see. But basically, this is how we climb the spiral staircase. Okay, if you're in a state of craving, which is like, let's be real here. The big thing we struggle with a lot of times is that we crave things that aren't good for us, right? Bottom line, it's like we want to do things that aren't good for us. We want to do bad shit, and we don't want to do the good stuff. Right? If we did just want to do all the good things and we didn't want to do all the bad things, well, then it'd be super easy to be the person that we want to be. But that's not how we're configured, because we've got all kinds of contradictions inside of us. We've got all kinds of inauthenticities inside of us. And if we learn how to do this properly, we'll learn how to actually clear all that shit out so that you can be the truest you. So let's talk about how do we do that? Well, say we notice that we're in a craving state. What we got to do to move to a state of, what we want to do is we want to move first to a state of conflict. Okay, let me make this clear. You can't just jump from a state of craving to a state of play. I mean, maybe you can sometimes, but usually not. You know, if you have a strong reframe and you get lucky in the moment, everything else lines up in your brain and circumstances are right, yeah, probably you can sometimes. Doesn't hurt to try. But in general, you're going to run into some problems when you try to do that. You're gonna get a little stuck on the inside. Okay, and so what we have to do is we got to go through this process, and we actually have to usually go through conflict. Okay, and I call this stage warding. So you go to craving and conflict through warding, and you can do this simply by just saying no. So say you want a cookie. Okay, you got the craving. Your mind's focused on it. You're zeroing in. It's like about to eat that cookie. If you can just say no, don't eat the cookie. All of a sudden, you're no longer in a state of just pure craving. You're now in a state of conflict. One part of your brain is saying no. Another part of your brain is saying yes. We need to get this. We need to get to this place. We need to break the hypnotic monofocus of craving. And so you do this by introducing some kind of counter narrative, okay? Some kind of other thought. It can just be a hard no, but you can make it more powerful by saying, no, man, you're trying to stick to your diet so that you can get in shape, so that you can blah, blah, blah. It's like you can play out a good commercial in your head, which makes this a more powerful and efficient step. I'm not going to be able to talk about all the different levels of skill that these activities have today, but that's the general idea here, is that you say no, you can introduce counter narratives, and then what this is going to do is it's going to expose the black hole. And the black hole is that underlying part of you that is longing for something. It's the underlying part of you that is dissatisfied, that is unhappy, that is driving you to reach out to try and stuff yourself with something. That's driving the craving. Okay, it's like the metaphorical God-shaped hole inside the addict that has them, trying to fill themselves up. It's, in terms of the vacuous and radiant, it's the part of you that desperately wants to be dignified, that feels like it's not good enough, and so it's not good enough, and it hates the feeling of itself, and so it's trying to find something to stuff itself with, something to cover it up, something to fill it, and so it craves something and it wants it, right? And this is what we want. We actually want to expose that part of you. We want to find that underlying piece, and the only way you're going to find it is by entering into a state of conflict with yourself when you're craving, okay? And so if you follow some of my other work, this is kind of like an expanded version of the cut method, and it's probably going to be the new way in which I teach this moving forward. But anyway, okay, back to this. So we say no, we expose the black hole. Well, next, and we moved into a state of conflict. All right, so what we want to do next is we want to move from conflict to passion, and we do that by entering into what I would call the purification stage, okay? And the way that this works is that we're going to connect to your true emotions, all right? We're gonna take those conflicts inside of you, and we're going to connect to the parts of them that are the most authentic. So let me break it down for you like this, all right? When you want something, okay? There's like the surface level want, and then there's the deeper want. All right, so say for example, you want that cookie, okay? And maybe in reality, you do just want a pleasurable mouthfeel. It's possible, but if that's the case, that's just gonna be a desire. I don't know if we would call that a craving, okay? Usually when you crave something like this, what's really going on is that, like we were saying before, there's some kind of deeper emotion that you're trying to cover up. You know, the craving for the cookie is really just a mask. And so what we're trying to do in the purification stage is we're trying to get down to the fundamental good thing that you desire. Because I would argue that every single desire that you have has to desire some kind of good. I don't think we can desire things that are actually bad. However, our good desires can get distorted. So for example, all right, one of the things I deal with all the time is guys who crave porn, but if we get to the heart of what that desire is that, oh, they want to not be lonely. They want connection. Or maybe they want relief from stress. They want peace, okay? But they don't know how to get that, and so they just kind of cover it up with porn, right? And so that's what we want to do in the second stage is we want to try and get down to the heart of what you really want and find the good inside of you. What we're doing here by moving from conflict to passion is that we are giving dignity to essentially the sub-personalities of your mind, okay? Like if you're interacting with other people and you're trying to be a good, spiritual person, one of the best things that you can do is learn how to see the God in them. And in other words, see the dignity in them, see the divine spark that makes them a truly inherently good thing despite how much of a prick they might be being in the moment. If you can learn how to see them with God's eyes, then you're going to be able to interact with them in a far more productive manner. It doesn't mean that you get steamrolled by them or you let them do bad things to you, but it allows you to maintain a certain level of respect that, from what my experience, it opens the door to entirely different levels of interaction. Because when people get treated with respect, in general, that gives you the best chances to actually make something good happen with that person. Now, we want to take that same concept and we want to apply it to the city of you, all right? Because all of us, it's hard to say that we are like one person, right? Because in reality, we got a bunch of different parts of us bouncing around inside of us, all these different sub-personalities. And I think most of us, the way that we interact with ourselves is that we kind of are a dick to ourself, to the different pieces of ourself. For example, if you're trying to lose weight and a part inside of you is saying, hey, give me a cookie, you're just like, shut up, idiot. And you're trying to squash you, try and keep it locked down. And the problem with this is that when you do this, it's going to cause that part, it's going to create more conflict, right? And we're not trying to be in a conflict state. We're trying to be in the passion state. We're trying to be in a unified state so that we can ultimately get to that state of play, that state of, fusion with the moment in a anabolically radiant fashion, okay? But in order to do that, we got to resolve this conflict, and we do that by seeing the dignity in all of our desires. And so you drill down into the craving, and you say, well, hey, what do you really want? Oh, you want some peace? Oh, you want some relief right now? Maybe you want a little escape from the stress of your life. Maybe you want to just reduce the physical discomfort that you're feeling because you're a sugar addict. Whatever. You got to try and connect to that true emotion, and this is the purification process. And it can go deeper into this because there can be all kinds of limiting beliefs and rationalizations and all kinds of shit like that, which if you watch my self-talk series, I talk through a bunch of that kind of stuff. But really what happens then is when you clarify all this and you realize you just have these good desires, you clear away all the bullshit and you just realize what you want. It's like, I want some peace, I want some connection, and I want to feel good, okay? At that point, we're not talking about the cookie anymore. We're talking about you. We're talking about what you want. And when that happens, you stop being at war with reality, because when you're focusing on getting specific things, all of a sudden you're dealing with a situation where you're living in a world with finite resources. You're living in a world of scarce resources, of limited resources, and so you are in this mentality of scarcity, and there's always going to be fighting, there's always going to be conflict. But when you purify your emotions and you connect with your authentic drives, you can shift out of that world of scarcity and fighting and into a world of essentially creativity, creative expression. It's like, okay, I have these desires, and now reality is my canvas that I can begin to paint on. How can I most authentically express these desires and honor them? Okay. Maybe it's to eat the cookie. Maybe it's just to eat one or two, not the whole bag. Maybe it's not to eat any of them at all, because the better expression is for you to stick to your diet. But you're not going to be able to get to that point unless you go through this purification process. But once you do, you're going to be able to start sorting through your options in a far different manner than you were previously when you're in that conflicted state. Okay. So this is what we got here. We got moved from conflict to passion. Now we want to go from passion to play. All right. And the way we do that is through making sacrifices. All right. Essentially, to move from passion to play, you have to let go of everything misaligned with the authentic expression that you choose. Okay. You can call this the embrace of constraints. All right. And I've talked about this in one of my more recent videos where you have to embrace constraints if you really want to play a game. Okay. Because if there are no rules, then there's no path, really. It's just, you're just floating in amorphous space and there's no way to actually make anything happen, right? Or if you're just floating in alternate fantasy realms where you can have it all, that doesn't let you, that doesn't map to reality at all, right? So at some point, you're always going to have to make choices, and every choice is a sacrifice, right? Every choice requires you to give up everything else to do that one thing, right? And so if you try to enter into the sacrificial state while you're still conflicted, what ends up happening is you just fight yourself. You just end up falling back into a state of craving eventually, almost immediately. Usually you're just going to feel like you're losing. But if you really purify your emotions first, well, then sacrifice actually feels empowering. It feels invigorating. It feels like it's something being expressed and let loose here. And what this does then is like, all right, I'm going to give up the cookie. Well, then what that does is it puts you in a position where you have a clear focus then. It takes the optionality away, and all of a sudden you're on a straight line rather than this branching path. And once you have a straight line, you've chosen a direction, you've decided to make this sacrifice in your head and your heart. Well, then at that point, that's when you get to move into the play state. And the play state is just the state of flow. It's the state of you rocking along on your most authentic path, just being you. And it feels good and it feels great. And like that's where we want to be. And we want to try and get in that play state as much as we can. Ideally, we cycle between play and passion as much as we can. But, we've got the spiral staircase, right? Like we're not going to stay perfectly radiant, right? Perfectly, authentically expressive. All right. We're going to run into problems. And the reason we run into problems is because of attachment. Okay. Attachment is where, so we get into a good groove, passion, play, killing it. Well, eventually we're going to get attached to that groove that we're in. And that's just the way we work. Like whatever we experience, especially if it's a good thing, our homeostasis, our comfort zone starts to conform around that. We get used to it. And this is a physiological process. Our brain gets used to it. And then when that pattern is disrupted or we can't get it for some reason, all of a sudden, we get frustrated and we find ourselves wanting that thing. We either go into a state of conflict or craving. Okay? It's like I got really used to sleeping super well, and then my 2-year-old had a sleep regression, and now I have her kicking me in my head every night. And like that's just what it is, right? And so there's a part of me that's conflicted and craves the old sleep and that sort of thing. And it's just what happens in life, okay? We're not going to be able to keep everything going smoothly the way we want it. And, if we don't address the attachment, okay, it can very easily lead us into a very, conflicted or craving sort of state. And that's not going to lead us anywhere good. And so the key is if we want to stay on the good path, is we learn how to cycle through this quickly. So as soon as the craving or the conflict come back up, boom, we try and just move through the process and get ourselves back into passion and then in play. Passion's where we're going to be figuring ourselves out, like what do we really want? And then from there, we can move into a state of play by deciding to make a sacrifice. Here's the game we're going to play. And that's where we want to stay as much as we can. We're going to drift over here sometimes. Boom, just move through it, pop back out, get back into the play. And the more adept we become at this cycle, the better. Now, this cycle doesn't just move this way. And this is where I think this model is like super cool. And I don't think I'm shoehorning this. I do think this is accurate. So, you know, check my work here. What happens if we reverse the flow? What if we go this way? What if we go counterclockwise? Well, I think that's what most people do, at least a lot of the time. They're in a state of craving, okay? And what they want to do is they satisfy that craving, and then they pick something, and they enter into a state of the addict's sort of play, state of indulgence, okay? They give in to the inauthentic compulsion and get a high, okay? And I wouldn't say, you know, indulging isn't always a bad thing, but I'm talking about like if you do it from like an unconscious place, a place where it's not truly authentic, you're just giving in, and you find a state of play. There's a bit of ecstasy in there, but the problem is it's a lower state of ecstasy. It's a less authentic state of ecstasy, and we'll talk about the levels of authenticity in a few moments here. Okay, so you go in this way. Next, okay, well, eventually as you do that, you get your little high. You go into this metafocus up here where of passion, and you start reorienting yourself according to getting the thing that you got here. Okay, you reorient yourself according to the addiction, according to the compulsion, and it's less authentic. It's a less authentic form of passion. This is the the addict who is orienting their life around trying to get their fix. So for me, for a long time, like when I was younger, I was just trying to orient my life around getting more time to play video games. Like that's what I wanted. You know, I would just, that was my passion, right? And what that really meant is that I was sacrificing things so that I could maximize this thing that was not entirely authentic. It wasn't entirely inauthentic, but it definitely wasn't entirely authentic, especially not the way that I was doing it. And so it was a lower form of passionate behavior, but that's what it was. And then the problem of going this way is that eventually you're going to run into the addict's troubles, all right? The authentic parts of you, your conscience, for example, will start to chafe against this. And then, you know, also so will your circumstances, right? Like, I started to realize, like with the video game stuff, like my work suffered, my relationship suffered, my sense of self suffered. It's like, man, do I really want to be just playing these freaking video games all day? And then eventually that leads you to lack and dissatisfaction, okay? And lack and dissatisfaction moves you down into craving, okay? You start experiencing less fulfillment. You start feeling the need to fill the void, and then it just cycles through this. This is basically the addict's process, okay? And so, obviously, this is not a good direction to go, and many of us do go this way quite often. Even myself, I'll do a little spiral like this quite regularly, right? But the big thing here that I'm realizing is that this circle here, okay, it's a helix, okay? This is the spiral staircase. You can either spiral up or you can spiral down. And so let's look at this amazing piece of artwork that I've developed here, okay? This is the spiral, okay? The higher up we go, the more authentically expressive we become, okay? And basically you become more of the real you as you travel up, as you go the first direction that we talked about. You become more fully a channel of divine goodness. And what that means is, like, if we're going to put it in spiritual terms, like, all right, let's say there is a divine spark inside of you. You know, say God made you as a true masterpiece of his art, okay? Well, that's what you are. And your job is to basically reflect that, to basically be a reflection of God's goodness, to be a piece of God in action. Okay, that's you. You're supposed to be amazing in this world in some form or another. And that's what I would argue you are. And that's what I think everyone who embraces the idea of inherent dignity has to come to on some philosophical level, okay? And if you keep following this practice of warding, purification, and sacrifice, you know, in an authentic way, and then obviously dealing with the attachment that comes and then keep cycling through, you're going to spiral up. You're going to spiral up this thing. And you're going to go higher and higher, and you're going to become kind of your super you, okay? Now, if you go the other way, Okay, you go to the addict's path, you're going to become more and more enslaved by the objects you grasp at, the objects that you idolize. And you're essentially going to become less you, all right? You're going to become more trapped behind your coping mechanisms. It's kind of like the further down you go, the more possessed you become, the more masked you become, the more like consumed by your addiction. Like if you've ever been an addict or you've known an addict, it's like, it's not who you really are, right? It's like, I remember this when I was a porn addict. It was like, man, I was like, this isn't who I am. This isn't who I want to be. But like, you have this mask, you have this coping mechanism that you're using to cover up those fundamental pains and drives and desires. And so you just keep buckling down, and then you just become something ugly and not true to who you are. And you end up becoming more and more controlled. It's kind of like, do you want to become more angelic and free or more demonic and possessed? Right? That's really what this is about. That's this whole spiral staircase sort of mentality that I'm trying to teach you guys here. So hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully this is useful to you. I can do more on these topics. I can talk more about like the ways in which this progresses, like the stages, or like how to move between the stages and everything like that. But we'll save that for another one. So this is what I got for you guys today. Hopefully you found this interesting. I don't think every single one of these podcasts is going to be as deep as this one, but we'll see. I'm gonna roll with what comes up each week. I'm only giving myself a certain amount of time for each one. So this just happened to have a lot pop up real quick. So hopefully you dug it. I'll see you on the next one. Ooh, yeah.